his will in all you do, and he will show you which path to take. Proverbs 3:5-6. For me, these verses have been a guide to my life today. Trusting in God in all circumstances, good and bad, is really difficult to do. But his understanding of things is so beyond what my flesh can understand. And his will for my life is usually not what I would will for myself. But his will leads down a path full of grace, forgiveness, love, and freedom. Why am I here today speaking with you? Because before Sheepgate, I was drinking more than half a gallon of alcohol on a daily basis. I was so dependent on alcohol that my body was rejecting food anytime I would try to eat. My body would convulse with shakes that I would barely be able to walk. Holding a fork to try to eat was nearly impossible. My hair was falling out, my body was bruised all over. Sleep was non-existent, but passing out only to wake up in my own puke was a daily occurrence. I was staring Satan square in the face, filled with fear, anger, resentment, and sadness. I was knocking on death's door, but I did not want to die at Satan's hands. I wanted to believe that there was something bigger and greater than the evil that was engulfing my life. You see, my dad has been an alcoholic my entire life, and my mom has struggled with her own personal insecurities. My parents separated and divorced when I was 15, which is when I started turning to self-harm habits, cutting, controlling food intake, and excessive exercise. It was a way for me to release anger and frustration and have a sense of control when I felt like I couldn't control anything. I got married and had 3 beautiful children. After having my kids, though, I became filled with an emptiness. I was put on numerous medications for anxiety, depression, and also started turning to alcohol to self-medicate. I loved being a mom, but always felt this heavy weight of sadness that just wouldn't go away. The medications prescribed just kept increasing, but so did my drinking habits. My drinking got so out of control that it became verbally and physically abusive. My drinking got so out of control that I was constantly yelling at my kids, and my husband and I became verbally and physically abusive towards each other. And I was physically harming myself. I was also drinking and driving with my kids in the car, which on several occasions I vividly remember my daughter screaming and crying in the back seat, begging me to pull over and asking for her dad. I tried to go to AA, was in and out of 3 different rehab facilities, and was even sent to a mental health facility. My actions left my kids scared and confused, and brought out an anger in my husband that ultimately left him filing for divorce. The pain of losing my husband and kids left me spiraling out of control, drinking even more. I received 2 DUIs, jail time, and a restraining order, leaving me unable to see or speak to my kids. For me, death seemed like a better option than living without my kids. I entered the doors of this faith-based program in October 2018 on the verge of death. It was a long road ahead, but I was ready to face my enemy. It took me 2 times going through the program, a total of 2 years. I was a little stubborn, but also determined. But years of bad habits, lies told to myself, anger and resentment don't just go away overnight. I vividly remember a turning point in my life at Sheepgate. It was my second go-around of the program, which was much more difficult than the first. I had been told to focus on the Gospels and read them as many times as I needed to gain a sense of who Jesus was. I had a spot out in the barn on the property that I would go to on a daily basis usually, just to read the Bible, pray, revel in the beauty of nature. It was a doorway in one of the barn stalls, and I would sit on the ledge of the stall door, and I would look out at the pasture, the clouds, the animals, and take in the smell and sounds of the outside. I was sitting there one morning with my eyes closed, and I heard this really strong voice come over me and tell me to move over. When I opened my eyes, I can still see to this day this man standing in front of me. And I thought to myself, what does this even mean, move over? But I listened, and I physically scooted my butt over in the barn stall door. And I sat there, and this man that was standing in front of me sat down next to me and put his arm around me. It was that moment that I realized I was trying to control aspects of my life that weren't mine to control. It was that moment that I began having a true relationship with Jesus and truly getting to know who he was and how to be more like him. It was a process, but this was the start of me opening my heart to someone that I thought I couldn't hear or see. I remember being put on a word fast, not talking at all, or I think it was a week, might have been a few days, but it felt like a month. It was a difficult task, but it made me realize that the thoughts that I was thinking and the words that I would allow out of my mouth were negative and unkind. It was one of the disciplines, one out of many that I was actually grateful for because it taught me to rebuke and change the thoughts into positive instead of negative. And then to discern the words that came out of my mouth. This word fast helped me to discern what is right, what is true, and what is from God, as well as how to respond to situations and people in my life instead of react. Along with the word fast, one of the most simplest but most difficult things that I had to do was each morning I had to go downstairs and tell staff 3 I ams. And one thing that I was grateful for. You know, it may seem that this is something that is simple, but it was one of the most difficult things for me to do. I would stand in the doorway before words would even come out of my mouth, tears would just flow down my face. It was so hard for me to sit and say, I am loved, when I felt rejected and anything but love. Or to say that I'm worthy of happiness, when I had hurt so many people in my life. Or to sit and say, I'm strong, when I felt weak and like a failure. And to be grateful for anything that I had in my life, when I felt like I had lost everything and everyone. It was so hard staying and believing these things, but the more I forced myself to say these things, the more I began to think there was a possibility that I could believe them. You see, I felt that I wasn't deserving of believing and feeling these things. But in reality, I was loved. I was worthy of joy, and I was steadfast and strong. And why? Because I had Jesus by my side, and I was grateful for him and the possibilities of what he could do in my life. When I chose to restart the program, I realized I needed to get real with myself, and to be honest, I was told to go through problems on a daily basis and write out where I did God's work and where I fell short with doing God's work. I also wrote my own commentaries on different stories in the Bible and how I relate my life to other people in the Bible, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I had to be brutally honest with myself, and it showed me areas of pride, judgment, selfishness, and unkindness inside. I had to give the hard truth, but I had to receive the hard truth back. I completed the Sheep Gate program in October of 2020. It took me 2 years and several relapses, and the relapses even in the program as well, to realize that God wasn't going to give up on me, and that it's okay to trust him with my whole heart. I have been sober now for over 2 years, and I have learned to respond to things in my life as Jesus would, and not react out of my emotions. In Joel 2, God says that I will repay you for the years that the locusts have eaten. God has multiplied in my life in something bigger and greater than I could have ever imagined. After 4 years of not being able to see or speak to my children, I now speak to them and see them on a regular basis. And they're here with me tonight. And I'm learning to co-parent with my ex-husband and their stepmom. I now have a relationship that I'm still working on with my mom and my dad that include many boundaries. And I have since remarried, and I have a very loving and supportive husband that holds me accountable. I have an amazing job as a chiropractic assistant for Beatrice Family Chiropractic, which has allowed me to share my story with others and have compassion for others who are struggling and hurting. God has multiplied an army of people as mentors, support, and accountability in my life. Looking back, I can see how God protected me and my children, and the people He put in my life along the way to guide me to Him. I know God has a purpose for me in multiplying His word, His love, and His grace. When I once didn't love myself, and therefore was incapable of loving others, I have now learned that I need to be loud with love and give others the grace that God has shown me. I go back to the Gospels and I look at how Jesus treated others with love, grace, forgiveness, and He multiplied His word through His action towards others. It is doing the hard things that our flesh doesn't want to do, like saying happy anniversary to my ex-husband, his now wife, who I haven't always gotten along the greatest with. My children, I hope, now see a mom who stops and listens and hugs them instead of yelling. They enjoy going to church and often ask questions about faith and who this man Jesus is. And I like to think that I have taught them that mistakes don't define who you are. Pick yourself back up and learn from them. With God, you can do anything. So be the person God has called you to be and multiply yourself with love for others as Jesus has